everybody. So today I just wanted to make a quick video talking a little bit more about images within your visual. So you've got this PowerPoint visual. We talked a little bit about that in the last video I made about creating this visual PowerPoint to speak with as you deliver your presentation, and how to do that in the video about turning the template that I provided into an actual PowerPoint. One of the things you might have noticed in that video was that I have images in there. So I want to talk a little bit about citing the images. Even before that, if you want some help on selecting the images, I think that this in the reflection speech folder, actually, you know what? I think it might be. Yeah, it is in the reflection speech folder. This multimodal presentations PowerPoint talks a little bit about selecting images and the power that images have. So if you look at the images I picked this one because it ties into this idea of dress codes having been thoroughly debated. So I didn't just pick a random picture. You can get into trouble with that if you just type in the topic of your paper and pick the first couple images that come up because you're not thinking about how those images might impact the reader. So make sure that your images go along with your message and that they're not too, controversial or influential or biased when you put them on the screen, especially for this reflection presentation. So I picked this just because this was an example of how this is already being debated at the K through 12 level to show that there is some conversation around whether or not dress codes are appropriate. Down here, I picked a really neutral picture of college students in kind of a lecture hall in relatively professional attire. So those are basically the images that I have. So once you're past the selection phase, and I would do a couple, I didn't do very many. I would suggest maybe even if you could get a third one in at the conclusion, something like that, it might not be a bad idea. And if you listen to my presentation, I did speak a little bit about this one. I didn't mention this one at all because there's no need for me to say like, and here's a picture of somebody in professional dress. If your images are just there to work along with your words, to just kind of offer some visual interest to your words, you don't necessarily need to talk about them or say like, here's a picture of this. If you're talking about a graph, it's probably a good idea if your figure's a graph, if it shows important numbers. But if you watch my presentation that I did for this PowerPoint, I don't even talk about this picture. And I mentioned this one in passing. So it's up to you, just whether or not talking about the picture needs to be a part of your actual presentation. So once you've selected these images, here they are, you'll notice that the first one says figure 1, and the next one says figure 2. I realized that these did not, there we go. So at the top, that's something you want to do. Figure 1, figure 2. Obviously, this one's figure 1 because it comes first in the PowerPoint. This is figure 2 because it comes next. So above it, I've added these figures. And then underneath, in teeny tiny writing, you can see that I kind of played around with it to get it to fit under here. You could go to 8, you could go to 9, whatever the font is that you're using. You want it to be small, legible, but it doesn't need to be huge. You don't want it distracting from the picture. You don't want it going all the way off the end of the slide at the bottom. So you can play around with the size of the text box. You can, use the guidelines to line it up underneath the picture. So it's not obtrusive, but you do want this little citation. And I think I said in the other video that you'd want to then add the websites that you use for the images in the references, but I was mistaken. Looking back over APA 7, I think that that's something that's shifted a little bit. So you do not need to include anything in the references but your references. This is going to count as your reference. That's what I've kind of gleaned from looking through Chapter 7. And when I say Chapter 7, if you have the textbook, the APA guide that goes along, Chapter 7 is all about tables and figures. So it starts on page 131, and if you look through it, you'll get an idea of how images and figures are used in APA. And it's a little bit confusing because in this chapter, the only photographs that are included are photographs that the author of the paper took to back up their point. Typically, in your actual papers, there aren't a lot of external images. So it's a little bit strange coming up with how to cite these things appropriately. So because we're doing this in this format, in this PowerPoint, I do want you to give some kind of credit because that's the habit you want to always get into. But having said that, it's a little bit difficult to figure out exactly how to do it. So I'm going to show you what I did. So here I have this picture. I found this picture online. I wrote figure 1 above it. I pasted it in. And then underneath, how did I come up with this information? I used the link that I provided for you guys in the last announcement, which I have up here. This link that says, I think it says like APA, how to cite images in APA, is in both announcements from week 5, and it's linked under reflection speech in the content module as well. And I just followed this example to the best of my ability. So you can see, this is the sample. This is because I figure, all right, what I have is a picture from a website. So this tells you how to do it, and this gives you an example. If you're looking at this, I don't have all of this information. All of this information isn't always available, so I just put in what I did have. If you look at this article itself, the note is a quick description. So this is a picture of high school students protesting a ban on skirts at their Catholic school. I know that because I looked through the article. Here's the article itself. Here's the picture. Underneath the picture, I can see that there's a courtesy of. So this is the person that I'm going to consider the author of the image. There's not always going to be this option underneath. You can do some investigating and dig in and try and find the original photographer, and that's awesome if you can. If not, just do the best that you can in terms of getting the information in there. So I have this note in sentence capitalization, and then I have reprinted from, and I'm following this sample here. Here it says reprinted or adapted. It's not, it's reprinted from, and then title of website, and then by author first initial. So here the only thing I want you guys to understand is don't use the author of the article. The author of the article is Chrissy Callahan, but she did not take this picture. Carrie Wilhite did. So in this case, author is referring to the person who took the picture. So you can see by C. Wilhite, and I don't know when the picture was taken. I know when the article was written, but I can't guarantee that it's around the same time. So I'm not going to include the year or the information from the article itself because there's no date written underneath. If you're taking an image from a newspaper, there's likely a photo credit with a date on it, and that's what you would include here. And then I just have the website where I found the information. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm including what I do have. This is a really good example of one where if you go to this original article, and here I included a retrieval date. There's nothing underneath this picture. Grace Chin didn't necessarily take this picture on November 11th, 2019, so I'm not going to include that information. What I am going to include is the note, a description, reprinted from with the community college review information, no date, and then I'm going to say the retrieved from. I probably should have included the retrieved from information up here. It would have been the exact same date. So you can see that I'm just doing the best that I can. To enter this, to put this in there, I am including a text box. So you can just do insert text box to do it underneath, type it up, whatever you need to do, and then make it tiny and recenter it. I don't actually need this text box though. So basically, I'm just trying my best to acknowledge. You might notice here, so like whatever information from this that I can find, I'm going to format it like this and include it. I'm not going to include the copyright unless I can find it. And I'm probably not going to include the reprinted with permission because we're not actually printing this. This is falling under the category of... I can't remember the exact term, but what you're doing with your particular assignments is not a version of fair use. There we go. You are participating in fair use. This is for educational purposes. You're not going to sell this, get money from this. You're using an image for the purpose of illustrating a point in an academic paper. So we're not going to get into copyright trouble in the same way that somebody who's printing a paper following this guide might. So just do the best that you can following this example. Include what you can in a little tiny box underneath.